Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash. This is HeroQuest, and it's time for another BwodeCast, the podcast-styled series where we talk about all things HeroQuest and tangentially related dungeon crawlers. This series is best enjoyed just listening on the way to work, on the way from work, dropping the kids off, picking the kids up, being dropped off, or getting picked up if you are a kid. Otherwise, maybe sorting through cards, painting minis, doing the laundry, doing the dishes. The list goes on and on. Let me know what you enjoy doing while listening to the BwodeCast. And don't say Fire of Wrath. That stands strictly in opposition to everything that we stand for here at the BwodeCast. It has been revealed at Lucca 23 Comics and Games Convention in Italy. We now know that HeroQuest Against the Ogre Horde quest pack is coming. We don't know exactly when, and although I say revealed, it was done so in a very minimalistic way. We had quite the show. We had a lot of different games and things being talked about at the convention, almost entirely in Italian, except for where translators and English-speaking guests were concerned. And if you wanted to enjoy the show, you could actually caught it on Twitch. You might still be able to catch it entirely on Twitch if they kept the videos up. I know on Twitch, if you don't, then it deletes after a while. But I don't see any reason why you can't find footage of everything that was going on for the show. Joe Manganiello was on there, and he talked a lot about Dungeons and Dragons and the like. And I'm sure that people, knowing that HeroQuest something was going to be revealed, probably thought, Joe Manganiello, HeroQuest, we're going to see COPD, we're going to see Cryptid Perpetual Darkness. I didn't think for a second that was going to happen. I did see Joe. I did know that he is a strong advocate for nerdism. He had some fun stories too. He had some fun stuff to talk about if you listen to him, talking about how him and all these celebrities were playing Dungeons and Dragons at his mansion while they landed in on the helicopter pad. And oh, look at all these nerds that are well-to-do. They also play Dungeons and Dragons. How awesome. So mommies, please let your kids grow up to be dungeon masters, I guess was the point of all that. I'm having a little bit of fun too. It wasn't exactly that, but it almost was. I mean, it was pretty close. I'm not exaggerating too much. Movie stars and celebrities and stuff going to Joe's house to play D&D. But no Crypt of Perpetual Darkness. Instead, we got this. And this is all we got. They showed off the box, and we didn't get a good picture of it because it was grainy footage over a live stream, and we just know that, hey, it's a box. This is kind of what we've seen, though. This is the image that gets shown that you're seeing posted across now on social medias, and this is Against the Ogre Horde. So we're going to talk about this quest pack. We're going to talk about what we know about it now, what has been revealed officially, and how this changes any of the speculation that I might have or thoughts from some folks in the community, the communities in which I'm involved. So that includes the Amalgam Archive, which is always free and very welcoming. If you want to join, link in the description below. It is an asynchronous text server. It's in Discord, so if you have a free Discord account, you can just join, and you can even lurk if you want. I don't pressure anybody into talking. We welcome them, and then we leave them alone, and then if they want to talk, join in, share memes, goof off, talk about HeroQuest stuff, share what they know, news, how they play, pictures of minis that they've painted. That's stuff that you can do, and that's awesome. But definitely check it out if you'd like. You get a lot more Ash that way. I'm very active in my own server. HeroQuest Against the Ogre Horde was an expansion that was released way back. We're saying 30 plus years ago in Europe, along with the Wizards of Morcar. It was a European expansion, so it followed the EU rule set of the monsters generally having one body point, and then there were small little niche differences in the rules between the US and EU game systems anyway. So this would have been designed with those niche rules in mind. With it coming to the US, or globally, but with using what used to be US rules, we are seeing what could be massive changes. Massive. There's a huge challenge. There's going to be a lot of ogre puns going around because of this. My favorite is it's all ogre now, thanks to Shrek. We're not going to get into any of that, though. By the way, this video will be best enjoyed listening. It's minimally graphical. It's graphically minimally invasive. We're just going to focus on this picture here and the webcam footage. And the only reason we're doing the webcam footage is because I had like 4 takes in which I totally screwed up my intro and everything. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'm more comfortable just talking to the camera when it's on. So there's that. Against the Ogre Horde. So this is going to be, I think, a conversion to the US rule set, is how I'll phrase that. I'm not going to disclaimer and correct it. That's basically what it amounts to. The ogres on the front and the picture on the front is identical to the classic expansion art and arrangement, although it is updated for the newer art style. We see a modern interpretation of ogres here. The ogres in the rightmost ogre in the very front. He kind of bears a passing resemblance to the ogre in the artwork used for the Mage of the Mirror box, but not a lot. The rest of the ogres almost don't look like that ogre at all. So it kind of stands to reason that every ogre looks a little bit different. Every ogre is very differently proportioned from all the other races. These ogres actually look a lot like Games Workshop orcs. Well, I guess I'm looking at one in particular. But I'm not the only one who thinks that. And I guess it's a better thing that they look like Games Workshop orcs than Games Workshop ogres. Don't get me wrong. I love the classic Games Workshop ogres. I love them. They're huge, bumbling fools. I used to watch Fraggle Rock, and the guys in that, I can't remember what they were called. There was like a race that the Fraggles would come up and annoy and visit sometimes. It wasn't the old man and the dog. They were like huge ogre-like people, though. And they really reminded me of those guys. And the Citadel miniatures, they have this weird sort of just belligerence to them that goes beyond them being a fantasy race. It's almost as if they live in Wales or in the UK. And they're really angry because the taxes have gone up and they just missed the tram. And there's another leak in the apartment, and they've had it. You know, they're over it. They're ogre it. But the contemporary ogres, this is a different flavor. There is something very warlord about them. There's something very warlike. They don't seem to be the same kind of ogres. The ogres of the classic X-Pack, they're not really factioned. They're like, we'll kind of work for the highest bidder. We will work for food. And we will eat people. We'll eat you. We'll eat our employers. You know, no big. It's fine. Not really a sense of pride. Not really a sense of like expanding territory. Not hoarding treasure. They were just there doing whatever they wanted, and they were hungry. That is the classic HeroQuest ogre. I'm not going to speak to the Games Workshop ogres overall because I don't find the two are one and the same. I see one being kind of like a branch of the other. So without any other context, you know, a very interesting race and one that could have made more appearances. And I guess did with Mage of the Mirror, but I mean, I don't count that. They're just there, you know. They just exist because of obligations set forth by the game designer. But the Ogre Horde that we're going to see, this looks like it's going to be a bit different. I don't know if these ogres are going to be explained differently, if they're going to be described differently, because they're already going to have to make changes to the text. Small, subtle changes, but changes to that originally EU exclusive text. We're no longer working for Morcar. We have ogres that they don't even have to have the same mention, or they will use the exact same text and just replace Morcar with Zargon. I mean, that's fine too. If you've been watching the channel for any length of time, you know that there's a word that I really like to use. I like to use it on Amalgamash concerning video games. I like to use it here on HeroQuest concerning board games. I use it in day-to-day life. I use it during heavy discussions with Shar about worldly things. That word is convention. I love convention. And it's one of my favorite things. It's a way of doing things, a method that you have established. It provides so much clear context in situations where there might not be any. I've said before that Avalon Hill follows conventions. And what I mean by that phrasing is that they follow or seem to follow a set way of doing things, whether that's kind of in homage or tribute to the classic HeroQuest, or if it's something that they themselves are establishing. Convention is really important too. When you are creating a product that you're going to have a lot of different things, a lot of iterations of, it is important to have a convention that is somewhat visible to the public so that when they see what you're doing, they can kind of predict on what you will be doing next. They can kind of speculate on what that might look like. And if you follow a consistent convention, that can get people really dialing in exactly what it is that you're going to be doing next. Now, I've said before on the channel, and viewers have noted, that Avalon Hill has no problem breaking conventions. So we have a lot of solid, consistent conventions that have been there since every release, and they're contextual. It doesn't mean that every convention applies to every release. There are exceptions, but where there are exceptions in repeated situations, there are consistent treatments to those exceptions. This is going to be a first for a lot of things. This is the first of hopefully 2 European exclusive, previously, expansions that will be released worldwide and accessible to all. But that does mean change, no matter what, on some level. And in this case, on a lot of levels, that means a lot of change. This means checking out current conventions and seeing if we can stay on them, or establishing new conventions where previously there were none. This is the first expansion that released exclusively in the EU way back. The second one being Wizards of Morcar, which we don't have confirmed yet, but I think there's a lot of positive thinking, a lot of hope that it's going to come out now based on this. But there were a lot of differences. This expansion was based on the European rule set of the game system, which the biggest difference by and large was the fact that the monsters had 1 body point. In the US and now contemporary global rule set, a lot of monsters have 1 body point, yes, but several monsters have more than 1 body point, more than 2 body points. It gives those monsters added challenge because after you have broke through their high defense and landed a hit, they're still alive. They, on their next turn, can now come after you with their huge dread axes or abomination claws and continue to rend you to pieces as one does. So it kind of begs the question, how does Avalon Hill see the body points of the monsters contributing to the overall difficulty? Is it something that they considered already balanced? There are some people that have shared with me that they think Against the Ogre Horde, even if you convert it to the US rule set, is still a pretty easy expansion. Other people found it to be brutal. So I'm a bit kind of, I'm cognizant that there's always going to be those 2 camps of people and that you've got to try to strike a balance to please them both. But you have to at least recognize that significant changes have to be made regardless, because again, this expansion back in the day was based on the EU rule set, which had other differences from the US rule set. Every placement of monster and skirmish designed was based on those rules being in existence. So with these rules, the conversion to not only body points may have to be made, but also the idea of these different skirmishes and their configurations taking place. Now, they might not change a thing, and I would be all for that. I would be so happy if they embraced that, changing the game system monsters to their US hit points, or now standard hit points. And I say hit points because I'm kind of on a roll here, but it's body points. And just keeping the other rules in the current system intact, that might be completely doable. That might be all the conversion it takes to have a pretty solid expansion. Because while this marks a change in kind of the enemies that we'll be facing, we're not the same heroes we used to be. We have on our side a plethora of brand new heroes that are able to enter the mix now and wildly affect the balance of this game more than ever before. You have warlocks, you have druids, you have knights, you have the same classic crew. But then, coming in with a wizard, a knight, a barbarian, and a dwarf, or perhaps replacing the dwarf with a rogue so that you've got more sneak attacks in, and getting a ton of gold from the game system to buy more short swords for the rogue and long swords for the knight. The heroes are now on a plane of existence where a simple wah doesn't quite strike fear into them the same way. I don't think true heroes would ever fear a wah, but if the wah was loud and commanding enough, I think even the strongest of heroes would wince a little bit at the oncoming horde of destruction. But that's just me, and I'm biased. Anyways, there's more to it than just that. The ogres themselves are a bit of a conundrum for me. I think that it's quite possible, based on what Avalon Hill have already done, that they'll have our warrior tier of the ogres just have their 5 body points instead of it being on a variable track, because the US game system Mage of the Mirror from way back had ogres that were 10 body points, and Avalon Hill said that's too much, and they truncated that. They cut them in half for the new version of Mage of the Mirror. So all of the ogres in Mage of the Mirror, today's version, have 5 body points. They took out a total of like 200 body points from that expansion. This, however, these ogres never had 10 BP. These ogres never even had 5 BP. In fact, these ogres operated on something called a variable body point tracker, which I mentioned a second ago. It was a line of white and black squares. Kind of like a piano has white and black keys, but the amount of white squares changed somewhat between the divisions of black squares in between. So you had like 3 white squares, 1 black square, 4 white squares, 1 black square, 2 white squares, 1 black square, something to that effect. Now, when you encountered an ogre in Against the Ogre Horde and you struck it, you were able to successfully land a blow and cause it a BP worth of damage, you would tick one of those white squares. You would tick the leftmost unticked square. And the way that the rules actually read in that expansion, for the addition of this tracker mechanic, which was in every quest, is that whenever you hit an ogre, no matter what ogre you are hitting, the ogre that you just encountered, the ogre a couple of rooms from now, when you hit an ogre and you land a hit, you actually damage it, you wound it, you'll tick off one of the boxes. If you've ticked off all of the white boxes in a division separated by a black box, the ogre that you just hit dies. It doesn't matter which ogre it is. It doesn't matter if you just encountered the ogre. I know there's people who are going to say, well, no, it wasn't intended to be that way. Zargon or Morcar was able to know which divisions of white squares belong to which ogre, and you were supposed to tick those off individually. That's not how the rules read, however. You go in a linear fashion ticking off boxes, and this means that an ogre that you fight could die in 1 hit. If you've already had a lot of hits on another ogre, and you've somehow roused a new ogre, or this is the first time you've gotten the chance to attack this second ogre after wailing on the first, it might die in 1 hit. It might have 1 body point before it goes down. That's good, because this ogre is now dead. That's bad, because the ogre that you've been attacking doesn't die yet. And now you're going to continue to put tick marks in the white squares until you've reached another end of the division, wherein that ogre will now die. So you have variable body points for the ogres. This means that an ogre could follow you around, and if you don't dispatch it, it could end up having pretty much all of the unticked white squares that don't end next to a black square on the tracker, which means that an ogre could have something like, I think I counted 12 body points if you let it live long enough. Now that scenario is not likely, but it's possible with the classic expansion. I don't know what they're going to do with this expansion. I don't know what the convention is going to be. I don't know what the established convention will be for this monster and for use of this tracker, which was only present in this one expansion, by the way. And I don't know if they'll be applying the same rules from the ogres in the US edition of Mage of the Mirror, now global, to the ogres in this expansion. I think there's a lot of people that speculate they will. And I honestly just have no speculation because it doesn't really matter to me very much what they do if they're not going to use the body tracker. I'm not going to be a fan of anything but the body tracker. I need the tracker, and I'll probably homebrew myself a tracker for use with this X pack, depending on what else they change. But I wanted to talk a bit about what we do know about this expansion now that it's come to light. All we saw was the box again, but we've seen the box now, and now we know this is going to be a larger size expansion, despite the, I'm going to say, minimal amount of content that came with the classic EU expansion, which was, for your information, 4 warrior ogres and then 3 individual unique ogre sculpts that just took up 1 square each on the board. And they were very, very similar to the ogre warriors. There's not a lot of variation between the ogres at all. Some are bald, some have like a mohawk deal. Others have these ridiculous locks. They've all got like the same expression. They've all got an arm that you were able to clip into the body, and the arm kind of moves a little bit, and it might have a big club attached to it. That sort of assembly was really cool, by the way, and it was like the only assembly that we really got in HeroQuest other than the assembly of the gargoyle, and I think the mage of the mirror, Sinestra, the archmage. You could take her head and put it on. I'm not really sure why that was necessary. Not just 1 sculpt, but there you have it. The ogres in this, however, we might see a lot more of. I mean, in number and in size. The size of the box, if there's one thing that Avalon Hill has been consistent about, it is that they pack their boxes full of stuff. They don't leave a lot of real estate untouched. They might have a spot here or there for where the cards are supposed to go after you have them all taken out and sorted, or a little pit for the dice or whatever. I don't keep a lot of stuff in expansion boxes. It usually goes into the main box with everything else. So it all ends up being unused real estate for me, and then the box just goes on a shelf for prideful display. But I'm surely certain that this is going to have a lot of stuff in it. Some people are speculating furniture, and it's kind of a given that we'll have the throne, since there was a throne that came with the original, and there wasn't really like an entire throne. It was just the cardboard punch out that you would then shape and fit between the original game system throne plastic end pieces. So you had an extra wide throne for an ogre to sit upon. This is probably going to be plastic because the game system throne is now plastic, and it's probably going to be all one piece instead of relying on anything from the game system. Dude, if this came with the 2 end pieces and just a big cardboard piece, my mind would be blown. But my mind's been blown a little bit from some of the stuff they've done. The giant mirror wall kind of made sense to stay cardboard, but then the classic doors, or the door-shaped pieces and the door bases that came with the Mage of the Mirror expansion, that made me question reality. That made me question what timeline I was living in, for sure. So it's really hard to say what this will come with. I think that a lot of folks are correct in assuming this is going to come with all of the contents of the original expansion, though. I'm certain that we're going to get a huge tile that is very big and with the interior on one side, and on the other side, because the tile was double-sided, a huge outdoor scene. Now, this scene only gets to be used, I think, twice in the original X-Pack. Once for the first, once for the last when you're... that's a spoiler. But the tile that has to be included with this, and it will be bigger because it has to fit the new 1-inch full standard of the HeroQuest board. So we're going to get a massive tile. We're going to get these massive minis. None of the ogres in the original were more than 1x1 tile. These guys might be bigger. You might see a couple in here that are 1x2. You might have one that's as big as the Frozen Horror. That would be pretty cool. I would like that. I never once thought that would be a bad change because they're ogres. They need to be huge. And the ogres that are supplied in the new Mage of the Mirror, they're big. I mean, they are proportionally much larger than the humans and elves and dwarves and halflings that come with the game system and its expansions, but they're not fearsome. They're kind of dumb looking, if I'm being totally honest with you. I actually prefer the classics to the ones, the warriors that came with Mage of the Mirror, but they could put some huge ogre enemies in here. And there's something else that we know about this box, this expansion. We know that, I believe Avalon Hill has confirmed it will have 10 quests. Now, I'm repeating this. This is secondhand information. This is not coming from me. I haven't confirmed that it'll have 10 quests. Somebody said Avalon Hill confirmed that it will have 10 quests. And I'm sure somebody will be kind enough to kind of point out where that was said below. But it could be that somebody thinks, based on discussions and interviews, that it should have 10. The original had 7. I see no reason not to bring it up to 10. Changes that are made that are additive. I keep having to stop and edit out when I yawn because I keep having yawns build up. I don't know why that is. It's the first video I'm recording for the week and I can do nothing but yawn. It is so frustrating. I have so much to edit out because of this habit on what is otherwise an extremely simple to edit video. Where was I? The changes. If there are additive changes, I'm all on board. I love additive changes. So adding quests in is great. So apparently we know there's going to be 10 quests. We do know, officially, confirmed, yes, that there is going to be a new way to play called the Arena. What this means exactly, what this entails, is anyone's guess. In the original HeroQuest game system, EU rules, first edition, there was an addendum that described how 2 players could play with an arena. And this was kind of a heroes fight to the death kind of thing. I don't think that that's going to be relevant or part of what this is at all, though. In this case, I think that this is going to be much more ogre-centric. I think that there's going to be a lot more mechanic, a lot more design, a lot more attention, deliberation in how this is executed. I don't think it's going to be half-assed or just a passing mention. I think something as big as what they are talking about, an arena, a new way to play, that wasn't present in the game system by just a paragraph in the book, I think that it's going to be pretty substantial. It might really give us some insight on upcoming material. We might have a lot of people playing this new way. It might be quite a community buzz. I'd be interested to hear how you think the arena is going to work. I don't really have any speculation on it this time. I'm not gonna delve too far into it. I think it's pretty broad as a concept. Definitely involves fighting, but it makes me feel kind of ashamed and really dumb for not catching that would be part of this because of the Gen Con and Spiel convention displays. I mean, they displayed an enormous, huge arena. And I think that there were some people out there who guessed at it and got it right. I don't know that they realized that that seriously would be a thing. But we were shown pictures of this, and the entire time we were shown a bit of a different picture every day from Gen Con, and we were teased a bit about something that we were missing. So many of us were worried about the configuration of the miniatures, how they were posed, what minis were in there, who maybe the first letter of every mini spells out what it's going to be in the next expansion or what the expansion is going to be. And I mean, we couldn't see the forest for the trees. This was the result of that clue, that baiting. It was an arena. And I mean, duh. It wasn't just a sculpture for fun. It was relevant. It was showing us what was going on. But we were told as well that the World's End tournament was going to happen, that being the mention on the Path of the Wandering Monk expansion. So it's really cool to see an arena mode kind of playing into that mention on the Monk character expansion box. We're going to get the Monk first. Of that, there is no doubt in my mind, and we're not sure when this is going to drop, but because it doesn't have a release date and the Monk does, I'm certain that we're going to get the Monk first. There's a lot of time between now and when this drops, for sure. So what are some other things that we absolutely know for certain about this quest pack? Well, it is a big box, so I think that's the first time I've been shot down about a speculation I've made, But I'm glad to be wrong about that speculation. One, because I like big box, I like more material. Two, it means to me that Wizards of Morcar, or a contemporary iteration of it, would also be a big box expansion. And that would be way more interesting to me to speculate on, because it came with so little content. 5 quests, 4 unique wizard miniatures, sorcerer miniatures, and 12 henchmen or men-at-arms, as well as some plastic stands and the like. All of that it came with, it just really did not necessitate a big package at all. So if this has a big package, then that could have a big package and a ton of stuff added in. But I think the establishment of new conventions with this release will be what clues us into what that could come with. And that'll be fun and interesting to me to talk about. So perhaps we will talk about it in an upcoming BwodeCast, a bit before it's time, to be certain. But I would love to hear your thoughts on what you might think a Wizards of Zargon expansion would come with. We know for sure that it's a big box. We know for sure that it will have an arena mode, and we know for sure that it is called Against the Ogre Horde, retaining the original name, not breaking that convention. The original name of the expansion released was Against the Ogre Horde. We were seeing some placeholder titles, just Ogre Horde expansion. That got some people talking. I'm really glad that they kept the original name. They didn't just leave it Ogre Horde or something, as dreary or less exciting. This is how I wanted it to be, so I'm glad that it is this way. So what speculations do I have left about this? I still think it's possible it could come with the Druid. No, I don't think it really matters. I don't really think that the Druid is part of the Ogre story. I do think with the addition of the new quests that they could definitely work the Druid in. They would have 3 whole quests to do it. That could be done. It could be executed. You can also have just 2 quests at the beginning and a quest at the very end. You could have all kinds of backstory as to how the ogres invaded once peaceful land ruled by people who were more in tune with nature, and they crushed all the nature down. They put up their giant stone arenas, and they covered them in skulls and blood of warriors, and this was just a huge affront to the nature, the flora and fauna in the area around. So, I mean, there are ways that they could do it, and so I'm not unconvinced that the Druid could be a part of this box. A lot of people think the Druid should be in the Crypt of Perpetual Darkness box. I've said it before, I'll say it again. That's not a given. We don't know that we're ever going to get that. Hopefully we do, but we don't know if we will. So having the Druid kind of be held off would be unfair to the Druid. If they're releasing the rest of the Mythic content in different forms over the years while that is waiting to happen, then I absolutely think the Druid should come before Crypt of Perpetual Darkness, even if it makes sense the most for the Druid to come with it. So unless they have some sort of deal struck already, and I think that if the Druid did not come with this expansion, that would actually give me hope that they had struck a deal for Crypt, because like I said, it just makes the most sense for the Druid to be with that expansion if it's coming, if we know that it's coming. And it makes more sense for the Druid to appear earlier if we don't know that that's coming, if that's still up in the air, if that's still really hush-hush, not talked about, or just really difficult to do. Could the Druid come with this? Yeah, and I think it would make sense. It would make more sense than putting a different hero in the box, a different brand new hero, when we already know that we're getting the monk. They wouldn't put a monk with this box knowing that we have a character expansion coming up that's going to be available retail. We're not having another Commander of the Guardian Knights situation, so we know that there's no missing out on the monk. So no reason to have the monk in this box. No reason to have the rogue in this box for the same reason, even though the rogue hasn't been included. Some folks thought that this might come with the dwarf, and while that's not my favorite speculation, I could definitely see it. It does mean to me that there would never be a Hammer of Hadraka or Sinister Sorcerers expansion, or at least if there was, then they would break the convention of not having the 3rd sculpt of each classic hero miniature included with the box, which is a small price to pay, especially when you consider that those, as brand new expansions, could just have brand new heroes, and that would be fine. But they were originally going to be the Dwarf and Wizard quest packs from back in the day on the US side. HeroQuest kind of oofed out before that could happen. So we might see a dwarf with an upcoming dwarf pack, or we might see the dwarf with this one and the wizard with Wizards of Morcar, or the, contemporary version of that. That's possible. Like I said, I don't like it because of what that implies to me, but if they break enough convention, then it doesn't matter what it implies to me, because they can do whatever they want and I'll still be able to get the things that I want through the unconventional means of how they do things, which makes me happy in the end. If a dwarf does come with this, it would be a female dwarf, and it would be not the mythic tier sculpt, but a different sculpt. We would have a third version of the dwarf. We would have the classic, or I guess I should say the original 2021 HeroQuest dwarf. We would have the mythic tier female dwarf, female presenting, and this would come with a female presenting dwarf as well. So interesting to see how they would pull that off and what that sculpt would look like, because our elf is very clearly based on the male version of the classic elf. Our barbarian is somewhat based on the classic sculpt of the barbarian in the Frozen Horror, but has a real Red Sonja vibe to it, just with more clothes. Did he really say that? What would the female dwarf look like? I would be very interested to see the third sculpt for the dwarf and what that would look like. And then that would pretty much tell me that an upcoming Wizards of Morcar variant would have a female wizard. And that would be very interesting to see as well. All right, I think that's about it from me. I want to thank everybody for listening in at this time, or watching my face move around if indeed you were watching this the whole time, at which point I'm sorry. This was a bit of a longer one. Perhaps it was an ogre-sized BwodeCast, or at least it feels longer because I've had a lot of different pauses and stuff that I need to edit out and post. Don't worry about that. Thank you so much for listening in, and I will see you in the next episode. Until then, why don't you join the Amalgam Archive? Check out my Patreon if you'd like to see what kind of rewards viewers can get. And if you like video games, check out my other channel, Amalgam Ash, which is where a lot of legacy HeroQuest content that I've done is actually still hanging out. I need to convert that stuff over to this channel at some point. But before I do that, I need to work out the body points of those videos and how they convert to the HeroQuest system of doing things. And then I've got to make sure that they follow the niche little rules, and I've got to make sure that they're consistent and that I follow a convention. Guys, thank you again for listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and bye for now.